There's an old story that the Jews tell about a God-fearing rabbi from their history. And the story goes that one day as this rabbi was traveling from his home and to the temple, he was confronted by God on the roadway right there in his path. And God said to him immediately, he said, "Do you see this huge rock at the side of the road?" And the rabbi answered, "Yes." And God said, "From this day forward, I want you to come here every day, and I want you to push for 1 hour with all your strength, everything you've got in you, and I want you to press against this rock and give it everything you've got for 1 hour a day." Now, the rabbi was confused by the request, and he didn't really understand why he was doing what he was doing, but nonetheless, he knew that on the next day, he would be right there where the rock was, and he would be doing what God had asked of him. And every day, with the regularity of the sun rising and setting, this rabbi would come back to this spot on the road that God had met him at. And he would give maximum effort, everything he had for the 60 minutes. He would press with his legs against the rock and his hands, pushing as hard as he could. He would lean against it and arch his back and press backwards, just with all that he had to move that rock. And his muscles would tire and sweat would roll down his brow, and the effort would just be tremendous in the heat of the day before he went to the temple. And this went on for weeks and then months and then years. And after about 3 years, the rabbi, one day when he came, he just looked down at the rock and he realized a truth. He realized that the rock hadn't moved, not 1 inch, not 1 centimeter. The rock hadn't moved at all. And he said to himself, he said, "I'm failing in my work for the Lord. I'm failing. Even though I'm being obedient, I'm failing." And the devil, hearing him talking to himself, he seized the opportunity and he intervened. And he said, "If you continue to work so hard against this heavy stone, you're going to die. You won't be able to survive. Because a man can't take this. His body is not made for this kind of pressure and this kind of work." And the rabbi had to agree with him. This was a task that he realized that he was not big enough, strong enough to undertake. And in the days that followed, the rabbi decided that he would just take a different route to the temple. He wouldn't go that way anymore. He wouldn't look at that rock that reminded him of his failure. And after about 10 days of traveling down this new road, God appeared to him again. And God quickly asked him a very legitimate question. God said, "Why have you stopped pushing against the rock that you promised you would press on?" And the rabbi looked at God so seriously and in pain, definitely. And he said, "I worked strenuously for months and years, and I never made a difference. This rock didn't move any at all in all my effort." And God's voice went soft. He got gentle because he was about to tell him the truth. And God said to the rabbi, "My friend, long ago when you asked, you agreed to my asking to serve me. You said you would do it. I told you to push with all your strength and all that you had in you. But never once did I mention that I expected you to move this rock. At least not by yourself. Your task was only to push. And now you come back to me and your strength is spent, thinking that you failed. You're ready to quit, to give up. But is all this that you're imagining, is it really true?" God asked the rabbi. He said, "Take a long look at yourself. Your arms are strong now and muscled, and your back is sinewed and brown, and your hands are calloused from the pressure, and your legs have become massive and hard through the opposition that the rock gave. You've grown powerful, and your ability now far surpasses that which you had when you began. Yet you say you have not succeeded in moving the rock. So you come to me with a heavy heart, God says. Isn't this God? And your energy and your desire, they're gone. And God said, my friend, I'll move the rock for you. You are called to obedience. You're called to exercise faith and trust in my wisdom. And all of this you have faithfully done. You did everything I asked of you, even though you think you failed because you couldn't move that rock. You know, every time we come to a new year, I think back to years ago. I had a weekly Sunday service at Royal Oaks for the residents there, and it was a wonderful thing. And every year on the Sunday closest to New Year's Day, I would say to them, the calendar's about to start over. We're going back to January, and it's a sign that spring can't be far behind. And it means that each one of us in this room, I would tell them, is faced with an ultimate truth. God is about to put new fruit on old trees. And God wants to remind us that it doesn't matter how many years we've been planted here, or how many branches we've lost from the storms and the scars that we have on the bark. He's about to use us one more time for His glory and His purposes, if we'll only let Him. You know, like that rabbi, I realized years ago that we have a tendency to grow weary in pressing ourselves against the unrelenting obstacles in this world, the things that just don't want to hear the spiritual words we have to say. We become discouraged very easily, and when our efforts seem to go unrewarded, we want immediate gratification. And we get tired and we get depressed, and we walk away and we try to find a new road where we can be more victorious, something easier, something simpler. And just as God said to the rabbi, I believe He's saying to us today, if that's our condition, I never meant for you to do the heavy lifting. I was only trying to strengthen you for the journey ahead. I don't know if you ever think about this, but it's said that we're human beings. That's what we're called. Yet somewhere in this process that we walk down, this thing about growing old in this life, we seem to want to change that. We want to move ourselves from being human beings to being human doings. Because what we do seems to be more important to us than who we are becoming. And I'm going to tell you right now that this is going to be a rock that you're going to struggle to move all the years of your life. This desire to do work that was never yours. One problem, I just mentioned it, is that we want to see measurable success. We want to be able to evaluate how we've done. How far have we come, we want to ask. And did we win or did we lose? Is God pleased with my efforts? You know, I think about this sometime, and I look through McFarland Hill's page, and I look at the number of views on the videos that I've done for the Lord, or I think about the salvations I might have influenced, or the prayers that I prayed for numerous people who don't even know or didn't care and don't now. And the time that I've given to studying God's Word. And, you know, I think I looked at them too many years as if they were competitions that I was trying to win. That I wanted to get more views. I wanted to get more hours of study. I wanted to get more hours in prayer. I wanted to lead more souls to Jesus than anybody else. but it was never meant to be that way. You know, our efforts for the Lord, they're nothing more than a spiritual workout. They're meant to prepare us for the battles that aren't even aligned on the battlefield in front of us yet. The heavy lifting, the constant pushing, the working that we do now, it's going to serve us later when we need that strength that we learned pushing against rocks that wouldn't move. You know, as a Christian, I don't want to get too far, but we desire to serve. And we should. We should desire to serve the Lord. He's done great things for us. And when we do, we imagine people like Paul or Peter or Elisha, Elijah or Samson or Moses and all the other men of action and victory and effort that you find in the Bible. And we see that if we look clearly at these passages, you know what you're going to realize? That everything they did not come through their fleshly effort. They never achieved the outcomes that they did in their own strength. Results were always heavenly oriented. They were that God might be glorified. Nothing's changed. You know, the great heroes of the faith, they have one quality that you and I need to learn to apply and adopt into our lives. It's an enviable quality, by the way. They were always available to God when He spoke. Like this rabbi, they were ready to do what He asked. In the Christian life, let me just tell you something. Availability is an asset that's valued way beyond that of capability. I've known so many people who had talent, who could do things, but they didn't. So they were worthless to the kingdom. But I've known people who had no ability, but they were always ready to serve. And they were the victors because they were a part of some of the greatest things that God was able to do in this world. This is something we've got to keep in mind. Be available to God. You know, many of the prophets, and they were all called by God, but many of them, they wanted to reject the call. Jeremiah, for instance, he didn't want it, but he said, "Oh Lord, your word, like a fire shut up in my bones." And they were asked to push God's word against the hard rocks of stubborn Israelite hearts. They were trying to move the hearts of Israel, and God had grown weary with them and upset with them. And He sent the prophets to speak, but they never were able to change Israel's hearts. But they were always available. You know, and even though nothing changed, God would tell them up front, He would say, "I want you to take this word," but they're not going to listen. But in the process of time, as they preached constantly that word that was given to them, God, working in the background, was able to change everything. And this is what you and I fail to see sometimes. You know, the issues that we're talking about right now, they remind me about a day years ago. I don't know if I was ever as downcast as I was on this day. I had a friend, and he was lost. And he was nearly 100 years old, and he had became a friend when we were playing in a pool league together, and he just was a great guy. And as time went on and I realized that he needed to be led to Jesus, I began to work. But his family moved him to Nashville, and I didn't get to see him on a regular basis anymore. And finally one day he had open heart surgery, and he'd made it through that, and he had a little car, and he told me that he was going to get in his car and he was going to come to Chattanooga by himself and visit me. And he did. And that day, we had lunch together and we talked, and then we went to play pool, which is what he loved to do when he was around me. When the time was growing short, I couldn't help myself. I gave him a strong gospel presentation and a clear-cut choice to make. And right there in the billiard club, Chattanooga Billiard Club, he burst into tears. I'll never forget it as long as I live. He was just crying. But he wasn't upset. He was weeping with conviction and knowing that God was calling him one last time. But the regulars in the room that knew me and knew him, they came over and they whisked him away from me. They took him away. They got on to me. They told me to stop hurting him with my words, as they said. And that evening, I'll never forget it. I was so downcast, and I was telling a story to my oldest son, Jeff, and we got into it. The story, and I said, I'm brokenhearted. I missed the last chance I had to lead this man to the Lord. And Jeff said to me, he said, Daddy, it's not your fault he didn't receive Christ. He said, most Christians would have never gone as far as you did. They never would have pushed the envelope and opened their mouth to share to that extent. And he said, Daddy, God didn't call you to save these people. That's his job. And your job is to tell them the truth and live what you believe. And I remember then that we're called to push against the rocks, not move them. And I hope that helps you today. You know, when we stop and we view this thing called success, we look at it objectively, we're going to realize if you think you've had success, it wasn't yours. I remember talking to my dad about this one night. He told me he had pulled himself up by his bootstraps. I said, no, I'm sorry, but you didn't. I said, somehow, some reason, God chose to bless you. And that's the way it is with all of us. When we view this success that we think we've had or we want to have, when we look at it for what it really is, it's not ours to hold. It's not ours. It's always God's. The story in this world is not our story. It's the story of God bringing us to a place where we can be his children. And as God implied to the rabbi, only he can move the stubborn hearts and souls of friends and loved ones and acquaintances. Only God can do that. But you know, something I learned in addition to this is that the more effort I'm willing to give into doing these spiritual labors that God gives me, the stronger become the muscles of my faith, and the stronger comes my desire to witness. It's not something you can do just every now and then. Either you're going to be sold on it and you're going to do it constantly, or you probably won't do it at all. And that's the facts. But if we remain obedient in the middle of all these situations where we're trying to lead people into the kingdom, or to at least guide them into the kingdom, God will sweep away the rocks that are willing to come to him. Did you know that? It's always God's job to move the heavy work, to do it himself with his own hands. And right now this sounds so simple to me, I'm wondering why I didn't pick a different subject for today's message. But at the same time, I know in my heart right now that I see myself, I know I do, as a human doing and not a human being. And you know what else I know? You do the same thing. Because it's something that happens on the inside of us. We're programmed for victory. We don't like defeat. And so we look for the things that we can do well. And we always judge by our strengths and our weaknesses. And we never regard God's power. This thing about being a human being and a human doing really hit me hard last week. Andrea and I took a trip, and we were escaping Christmas and the memories that were in our home following the death of Andrea's mother, Claire. She had only moved in a couple of months or weeks. I don't even remember. It was a short time. And during this time that we were away, the truth of this message that we're talking about today, it really body slammed me. It hit me hard. While we were gone, we didn't have a travel plan. We made a reservation in a hotel in Charleston, right in downtown, and for 5 nights. And in the end, we ended up staying in 3 different hotels, 3 completely different areas. But we had no agenda. We had no travel log. We had no plans. We had nowhere to be at any certain moment. We didn't make any arrangements to do things. A lot of days we went to bed early and we slept late. One evening we went to bed at 8:15. And we didn't eat when the clock told us to. We ate when we wanted to. And we ended up eating about twice a day, sleeping late in the day, as I said. And a few afternoons, all we did was we laid in the bed and we watched Christmas movies. And we gave love a chance to invade all the hardened cracks and crevices of life that had been neglected for so long. And we weren't doing anything. We were just being, just like God created us. And don't get me wrong. Listen, Andrea and I both feel like we've got a purpose for God in this life, and we want to see the work done. We want it to be accomplished. But that work is only meant to strengthen us for tomorrow and then the next day. And if we miss a period of time when we should have been witnessing to reset all the gauges back to normal, well, that's wise. That's not laziness. We live in a world that's dressed in rush and hurry. The microwave isn't quick enough anymore, and fast food's not fast enough. You check the interstate if you want to see the truth. There's people out there and they drive as if they're racing to win a huge silver cup or a fat check. And they're willing to run you off the road to claim a victory that no one else is going to know about. Because hurry has become the American way. Stress and hurry. But hurry is a condition that'll leave your heart in a damaged place. It'll put you in disarray emotionally. And tonight, I know this, beyond all other things I've said, my heart, your heart, they long for 3 things: peace and joy and comfort. And only heaven can provide those 3 things. You'll never get them by laboring harder, by working more, by being more successful. And what this means, and tax a fellow like me, is that Bible study shouldn't be done to find sermons and Sunday school lessons alone. That's not what it's for. It's an opportunity for Jesus, the balm of Gilead, the one who slows us down and recharges our batteries. It's a chance for Him to step in there and reprogram our hearts. And I never walk into a church without thinking of the huge rocks that I can't move. And I've come to believe that this is a trap devised by my enemy. We were created for worship and fellowship, not toil and sweat. In the calm quietness, did you hear it? Calm quietness. I'm learning that God will always come. And I'll be more ready in that place to sense His presence and to be in tune with it and to hear what He's got to say. And the problems of life and the struggles and the rocks, if you will, you want to call them that, they were just put there to strengthen me, to make my muscles, my spiritual muscles, my spiritual muscles to just get stronger to the place that I could fight against the pressure and the agitations that this world puts on me. And there's 2 verses that come immediately to mind. Ephesians 6:10 says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. not in the power of your might. You can be strong, but you have to be strong in the Lord and realize that it doesn't come from you. Zechariah 4:6 echoes this, and it's spoken to a king that's worried about battle plans. God says, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. All your victories are going to come outside of your own strength. They're going to come in the strength that only God can provide you. And you don't get that running into His presence and rushing away. So this week, I want to offer you an opportunity. I give you homework. Get up earlier. Move a little slower. Drive a little slower. Take a little more time. Pray a little bit on the move. Love a little deeper than you have been. And give God a window of time to do what He does best. And that is to do all things that we cannot accomplish in our own strength. That's what God's good at. I hope that this message has given you some insight. I hope it's given you some hope. I feel recharged. I feel like God's definitely working in my life right now. And it's all because I'm taking the time to let Him and to see Him doing it. This has been another chapter of Beneath the Scriptures. And I want to thank you and say God bless you for giving up your time to listen. And I pray that it makes a difference. That's my only hope. Y'all have a great new year. Enjoy it. Get you some rest. Walk a little slower. And let's get better at this thing called the Christian life this year. Are you ready? Let's get busy.